Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to No Point Gaming. I am Blindstone, here to bring you Titanfall 2, our first impressions, but also kind of game reviews, and I'll get into why here in a minute. So Titanfall 2, this is the PC version that you are seeing on screen, bought through Origin. First thing I'm going to say is it is actually a lot of fun. The biggest issue I have with it, there's actually a couple. If you're buying it just for the single player campaign, it is not worth it. The price point is extremely high for just buying something for a single player campaign, and it is also really short. Now, if you include the multiplayer in with it, multiplayer is actually quite a bit of fun. I've not had that much time in it. However, this review slash first impression is going to be focused on the single player campaign. So, the game released at a horrible time. It is stuck and compared to Battlefield 1 and the new Call of Duty as well, Infinite Warfare, I believe. Honestly, I don't pay that much attention to the Call of Duty series. Now, the length of the campaign is... I was able to beat it in 4.5 hours, probably a little less. So it doesn't really engage someone for just that length of time. It's not that it's boring. It is a lot of fun. But being 4.5 hours, you don't really feel immersed in the story. And I'm going to go a little more into the story here in a little bit. So let's get on to some of the other aspects of it, the graphics quality and the audio quality. The graphics, the game looks great. It looks beautiful for a modern age sci-fi shooter. I don't really have too many complaints. They don't overuse particle effects or anything like that, which is rare nowadays, and it's really refreshing to see. Now, with the audio though, there is some issues. I use a USB headset for playing with friends and all that, and playing the games, I use the headphones at least. And with it being a USB headset, there was a lot of distortion. Now, I know I'm not the only one who has received this. I found a way around it, and I went with a non-USB setup, and it fixed all those kind of audio issues. But what would happen when I was using my USB setup is you'd hear a lot of popping and crackling constantly. It happened more often when there was a lot of action on screen, a lot of bullet ricochet and all that kind of stuff. It's not pleasant to listen to, period. It was absolutely horrendous, and I think that needs to be fixed. Now, with that said, I am running on Windows 10. They do have some kind of audio module interface that links in with everything, which could be the reason. I don't actually know if this is Windows 7 supported or not. So, a couple audio issues. They are fixed if you just use your standard 3.5mm headphone jack. So, outside of those audio issues, the game worked really, really well. So, that's the technical side I have with it. Just some popping and some crackling, which gets really annoying really quick. So, with that out of the way, let's touch on the story. Story-wise, there's not a whole lot going on for it. You're essentially told that you're the good guys and you have to go fight these bad guys on a place called Typhoon. And you obtain this Titan from your mentor kind of biting the dust. He transfers all the piloting access and all those kind of codes to you. So, outside of that, you're essentially told to fight the bad guys who you realize are creating some kind of weapon. And you kind of learn that during a really, really cool scene, which I'm not going to touch too much on because of spoilers. It's probably one of the better parts of the game. So, with that said, outside of that, you're essentially trying to stop this giant weapon from being created. There is a tiny bit of a meta story, though. And that is the story between you becoming a pilot and the Titan, and what their bond actually is and means. And it's quite the best friendship story that you could have. So it is touching. There are often times that the pilot, your character, jokes around with the Titan, and because he's a robot, it does overuse the joke, "Oh, I don't understand your sarcasm," kind of quirk, but it is kind of adorable at the same time. So it's kind of interesting to witness and to experience. So, touching a little bit on that area that I don't want to spoil, it does have a one-time use mechanic, which I thought was really, really cool, and I'm really upset that you can't use that anywhere else outside of that mission. I'm not going to go into details on what the mechanic is, aside from it uses time. I don't think that's giving away too much. So, one thing I'm going to mention about the actual gameplay, as we're going to get more into the gameplay side of things, the on foot versus being in the Titan. The controls are actually pretty tight. I'll say that. However, when you're in this big machine, you don't actually feel that powerful. Because most of the times that you're actually in the machine, in the Titan, you are fighting other Titans, and your health is going down just as fast as it would be when you're on foot. So you don't really get any of that badassery, if you will, but at the same time, it's kind of neat because it does change up the controls a little bit and how you go about different situations. So it does add a bit of difference to it. Difference enough to keep you entertained. So we'll go on that. Now, with the Titan, you actually do find different loadouts and whatnot, and we're going to touch a little bit on progression. It's a very linear game. There's no question about it. Oh, right here. It's a little annoying because you can, if you don't want to try and figure out how to do the platforming, you can use a hologram and it'll teach you on how to do the jumps appropriately. So you actually make it, which, I mean, it kind of defeats the purpose of trying to figure it out. I mean, it shouldn't be there. I'm usually pretty against that kind of thing being implemented. I get it. There are some people who can't figure out the platforming. However, it's on such remedial jumps. So simple. Like, the wall running is a huge mechanic in the game. In the single player anyways. But when you only have to jump, wall run, and then jump onto a platform, it's pretty easy. It lasts a second. You shouldn't need any kind of guidance on how to go about that. And I think it is a little demeaning to the player. Maybe not for some, but I find it kind of silly in the end. I don't enjoy that aspect. So, anyways, going back to what I was going to say. With the Titan, you do get different loadouts as you continue through the story. And these different loadouts give you different weapons, whether it's you can hit Q on the PC and lock onto multiple targets and shoot 8-9 different missiles just throughout the area once they're locked on. And then some are like I don't want to say tractor beam, but some kind of laser that does a fair amount of damage, and it'll shoot whatever you're aiming at. It doesn't lock on or any of that. So, and then there's these different loadouts essentially change your Titan as well. So you do have ones that give a incendiary shockwave along the ground, which will annihilate Titans as well. It actually does a lot of damage to them because the incendiary does a lot of damage to metal. It's sorry, not incendiary, it's thermite. So my apologies on that. So you do get different loadouts and whatnot with the Titan. You do as well on the foot soldier, but they aren't that noticeable. With being on foot, you can change out your weapons and all that. You find different grenades and whatnot. I never actually found, or at least noticed, that I had any kind of gadget changes, I always just kept the cloak. So I could just get into certain areas really quick, get in behind the enemies, start punching them out, conserving my ammo, and continuing on. So there wasn't a need for anything else because it pretty much gave you a overpowered gadget as is. So that's the biggest differences between them. Obviously they are used at 2 different times, but that's all there is to it. The actual platforming. Now this is, I find it kind of strange because I said I'm not going to really touch on the multiplayer, but I am a tiny bit. The multiplayer maps, well, yes, they are large. However, they don't really consist of too much wall running or platforming experience at all. I mean, you have the ability to get up to certain areas, but it is not required. It does not put you in that kind of situation where you feel like you have to do the wall running or some kind of platforming anyways. And I think it's a bit of a downer because this game kind of thrives in that aspect. And the single player is done really well in that aspect because it does force you into situations where you do need to wall jump, wall run, and do platforming abilities. So the actual gameplay and game flow between multiplayer and single player are very, very different. I mean, it's going to be different anyways because you are playing against other players, people who are smart, unlike the AIs. I mean, this AI isn't too bad, but if you go cloak right in front of them, they just kind of stand around, where'd you go? So, I mean, it from a realistic standpoint, it's not the greatest. So, platforming in multiplayer is technically just a thing that's there. It's not forced upon, where single player, it's everywhere. And if you don't use platforming, then you're pretty much dead. So I think they could have done a bit better in multiplayer. I know there was a new map that did depend more on the platforming aspects. But even still, they have all these other maps for multiplayer that don't force you to get into that platforming aspect. And I think it's a little disappointing because of how much it actually does thrive in the game. So with that said, it kind of does go into level design as well. The single player level designs, they have some really neat ideas. I, for the most part, found it actually pretty good. But it does fall upon that general, let's just make a room and a path and then populate it kind of. I mean, there's not a whole lot in each room to kind of check out and look at. It's pretty much just, okay, there's a room with bad guys, kill the bad guys and continue forward. Now, with that said, I think it is mission 4. You are in a assembly factory. And I know there are some people who have absolutely hated this level and some who actually loved it. Now, I'm kind of on the fence. I died a few times because I wasn't expecting things, such as being crushed in a spot I didn't think I'd be crushed. Now, what's so special about the factory level is this factory is building up different kind of scenario platforms. They're building like grass, templates and all this kind of stuff, and you actually battle on them later on. But it does get a little confusing when you're platforming and running around and the floor that you're standing on, which is being constructed, starts turning on its side or starts turning upside down. And there's lots of other machineries that are kind of there just, I mean, for a actual reason for the factory being there. They are there to just destroy anyone who's in the way. So such as you'll be walking on this platform and eventually it'll just shoot up and get crushed, and at that point it's actually dirt being pushed into the metal platform for grass to start being implemented into it. It's a really neat level, really neat design. Outside of that, no other level really had that kind of engagement with the environment. So on one aspect, I really enjoyed the fact that they did that. On another aspect, I mean, it was a little annoying because there was a lot going on. And if you weren't paying special attention to where you're standing while being shot by multiple enemies, some with shields, so you can't take them out as quick, it got a little infuriating. Now, that's just my personal experience with it. There have been, I'm sure, some people who've just flown right through it. So, outside of that kind of level, there was not much level design that involved a lot of engagement. It's just, there's some bad guys in this room, get by it. However, you know what, I'm going to backtrack on what I just said there, because again, on that one, without giving any spoilers, the one level that has that one-time use mechanic that is really, really neat has a interesting design on the level, because you're technically going to 2 different levels in one. So there is that. I'm not going to touch too much on that because I don't want to give spoilers. It is probably one of the better levels in there. It has pretty good design in the end as well. So that's all I'm going to touch on for level design. The controls are actually pretty fluent. It actually gave me a bit of a Fear 3 feel for gunplay, if you've ever played that. And obviously you have your iron sights that you can aim down and all that kind of stuff. You don't have to. I actually did a lot of hip fire. The shotguns are actually really good for hip fire as well, which I found kind of funny, just because it does have a wide spread, yes, but at the same time, you didn't have to aim down your sights. You could fire from far away and still kill whatever it is you're aiming at. So, but as for the actual platforming aspects and the movement and all that kind of stuff, you move very fluently. When you are in the Titan, you are slowed down quite a bit. You do have your dash abilities in the Titan as well, depending on your loadout. You have different amounts of dash and all that kind of stuff. So, but when you're on foot, that's when you're going to notice the controls really play into effect. Your gun aiming and all that kind of stuff, it works well. They did a good job there. So, with that said, I'm going to finish this up. There's not a whole lot to really go on with a 4.5 hour campaign. Let's say 4 hours, because I was doing it on a live stream. So, finishing notes, it is fun. It is fun. I think it was released at a very bad time. The multiplayer is fun, but like I said, I'm not going into too much detail because there's still tons of content that I haven't actually gone through on the multiplayer side. But the big issue with the multiplayer at the moment is because it was released at a horrible time, the player base isn't that large. And honestly, I think this was one of the better ones in comparison to Battlefield 1 and Call of Duty, which is kind of unfortunate. I mean, there's lots of different ways to do your game. There's lots of different ways to actually make yourself mobile and play through different maps. So it is a little upsetting that it's not doing as well as this game actually should. But it is fun. It is a lot of fun. And I would highly suggest it if you are going for multiplayer as well. If you're just going for the campaign, I would definitely suggest that you hold off. It is a very short campaign, as I've said multiple times during this review. Keep that in mind. Do not buy this game for its campaign. However, if you do get it for the multiplayer, check out the campaign because it is fun. It adds a bit more different aspect to it. And I mean, Titanfall 1 never actually had a campaign, as far as I know. Anyways, I never actually played Titanfall 1. But as far as I know, it did not have a campaign. A lot of people asked for it, and unfortunately we got a bit of a short one. It is fast, it is short, but it is fun. I have no difficulty in saying that whatsoever. So, another issue with the campaign though is it does not have any kind of replayability unless you want to go collection hunting and find all the pilot hats, which require usually quite a bit more platforming to be done. So whether it's jumping between walls and all that stuff, you guys know what platforming is. I don't have to explain myself at this point, right? So the replayability, unless you're going for those helmets, not really worth it. So I think that's all there is to really say about Titanfall 1 campaign and a little bit of multiplayer. Multiplayer is fun. Check it out if you're willing to play the multiplayer. It is fun. So with that said, that's time to wrap it all up. I've been Blindstone. This has been No Point Gaming. If you enjoy your content, be sure to hit that subscribe button. If you like this video, please hit the like button. It does help us out, whether it's the subscriptions or the likes. Also, if you disliked it, tell us why. We want to engage more with our audience. We want to know what you guys are enjoying, what you guys aren't. That's as simple as that. So with that said, take care, everyone. Happy gaming. This has been No Point Gaming.
You were not invited to Kane's party, and that's why you're dead. Well, another runaway hero with an SRS Vanguard